Hey guys, this is Obadiah here, coming at you with another TRP3 extended video, where today we are doing part 2 of the campaign creation, where I'll be showing you guys how to make this bounty board an interactable object with TRP3 extended, as well as showcasing some of the changes that I made to our first quest, the Rotten One. Let's dive right into it. So, let's start off with the changes that I made briefly with our other quest, the Rotten One. You'll see here that under our campaign, I've added in 3 new quests, 2 of them being the other 2 NPCs that we'll be killing as a bounty, and the third being the bounty board. And I'll get to this quest in just a second. The first change that I made to the Rotten One quest is simply that I made the auto reveal not be present. So this quest will not be auto revealed when you start the campaign. The reason for that is I didn't want to force the player to have to immediately jump into slaying their first target. I want them to first actually have to find the bounty board and interact with it, and then choose which of the bounties they want to take. Making this not auto-reveal allows the player to have some choice in the matter, essentially. Going back to our campaign, and under our quests, that's why I made the bounty board. This is the first quest you'll get when you enter the campaign, and it'll teach you how to find the bounty board, as well as interact with it. You can see here that I have some generic information about the quest, as well as some objectives, and these objectives are a key feature of this quest. Hint number 1 tells you to go to the Scarlet Raven Tavern, which players will either have to look up where that is, or find out. Either way, if they're not in Duskwood, it'll give them a sense of direction of where to go. The second hint will be using the interaction button at the board. And what this is actually alluding to is actually an item that I made called Interact. This item is not tied to the campaign, and I understand that that might cause some issues and can be a little confusing as well, but I didn't want this item to be strictly tied to the campaign because I wanted the player to be able to use this item outside the campaign at any point that they wanted. Anyways, I'll get a little bit more into how to use this item in just a second. So, I didn't want these quests hints to be shown all at once, so I segmented them into hint 1 being shown first, basically when the quest is started, and hint 2 only showing once you got into the inn. And now we can go about show you guys how I go about doing that exactly. So, when this quest is started, it runs a workflow, and that workflow is called workflow start. If we go over here and look at workflow start, what workflow start does is it plays the quest accept sound. It delays for 8 seconds, and I'll tell you why in just a second, and then it reveals our first quest objective hint, which is go to the Scarlet Raven Tavern, and plays the noise for my objectives. The reason why it delays for 8 seconds is I actually have a workflow under campaign that when the campaign is started, it runs its own workflow where it will play a noise, which sounds like writing, and then display a text that basically says that you've embarked on a quest to find the bounty board, essentially. So, let's see what all that looks like. So if I go outside, start my quest campaign, there's the quest noise that plays instantly, delays for 3 seconds to show the campaign workflow start, and then plays the workflow start within the first quest, which is head to Scarlet Raven Tavern. That might sound like a lot, and I encourage you guys to rewind a little bit and go through it slowly so you guys are following along. Alright, so the next part, and you'll see it just triggered right there actually, is hint 2, that I only wanted it to display once we got inside the actual tavern itself. So you see here, it triggers once we get inside a certain radius. So what that's basically doing is it's using an event link. And what an event link is it measures a game event log that happens inside the game, in this case the zone changing, and then ties it to a workflow. To add a game link, you just add the button up top, you link it to a workflow. In this case, we're not going to link it to anything, and you can open up an event browser. For this one, it's under Map UI and under Zone Changed. So essentially, whenever the zone is changed, it'll trigger that event. And now that I'm thinking about it, zone changed indoors might also be a viable option here. I might actually do that. Alright, excellent. So I can actually show you guys how I did this. So we're going to delete this one. I'm going to do zone changed indoors. But you can imagine that this workflow would run anytime that I go indoors, and I only want to trigger it when it's inside here. So what I can do is I can actually move my character right at the threshold, and I can do a unit value point distance layer, use current position, so it'll record this position. I want that to be lesser than, and let's say a numeric value of just 4. Alright, let's save. And actually, let's quickly link it to the workflow in. And I'll show you what the workflow in does in just a second. So workflow in basically delays for just a very brief second, and then reveals the second quest objective, which is use the interact action at the board. So now, whenever we go indoors in this spot, it should change, and it's not. So let's quickly try resetting our campaign and see what happens. You get that spot, get the writing, you get the first quest objective. Alright. Oof, that doesn't work. Interesting. Alright, I'll be back, guys. Just 1 second. Alright, guys, I got it. So essentially, under the workflow of in, so the event links basically changes or triggers whenever the player's zone changes, whether it be from Darkshire to Duskwood, Duskwood into Elwyn Forest, or from this location right into the Scarlet Raven Tavern. I only want it to display something or the workflow to run, however, if the player is inside the actual inn. So this will trigger whenever the game notices you changing a location. Good God, that is loud. And the workflow will delay for half a second, and then it'll run the condition. So the reason why I couldn't put this condition on top of the event link is because I believe the game event change would happen just before the minimap text would update. And so sometimes that condition wouldn't be true, even though your player would technically be inside the inn. So essentially this gives a very brief buffer, and I can probably even make it a little bit lower, for the game to notice the change in the location, and then for the minimap text to update to Scarlet Raven Tavern. And then it'll reveal the quest objective, play the sound for the quest objective, and we can remove this last condition. I don't know why that's there. And we can hit save. So when I move from this location into this inn, it should trigger. Perfect. So it says use the interact action at the board. Awesome. So the next step now is going to be actually using this item, the interact option, at the bounty board itself. So what this should do is once I right click this guy, which I'll show you guys out here just because it won't do anything in the meantime, is it'll play a cast time, and then it'll open up a document. The reason why I didn't make this item part of the actual campaign itself is because I want the player to be able to use this item whenever they want, whether they're in a campaign or not. I want the world to feel interactive to them. So basically this player can use this item to interact with the board in this case. Let's just show you what that looks like in the meantime. So a lot happened there. First off, a document got displayed. Number 2, a sound played of the quest completion. And number 3, 2 objectives were completed, which were shown on screen. Let's delve into how that happened. So you'll see here under our workflow, we finished our first 2 workflows. And this interact one actually doesn't have any relation to the other 2. I actually have to delete this later on. So this is where might get a little bit of flack for how I did this, because the workflow that triggers the document is from an item outside of the campaign, and that item is interact. So let's talk about the interact item now. Basically, it's an item that you can right click to use, and when you right click to use it, it'll run this main workflow called alpha determinator. And what that basically does is it tells the item what workflow to run, and the workflow to run, each one is conditioned. So here's the cast time up here, and here are all the workflows that are tied to this item. Each of them are conditioned. Each of them either need a specific location for the character to be in, or a specific target to be targeted for the workflow to be triggered. In this case, our workflow that we're running is called Darkshire _ board, and its condition is that the player be in this location right here. So I set the player distance to be this location right here, lesser than or equal to 2. If we preview this test, it'll say true down here. Excellent. So when this workflow runs, which is right here, it displays a document. Now this document is inside the campaign. So you can see how that might be a little problematic. We're jumping from the campaign to outside the campaign to back inside the campaign. So ideally, this item, the interact item, you would have inside the campaign. I initially set up this item long before this quest, so unfortunately, I decided not to put it inside the campaign. Anyways, the quest actually works fine with like it is, and we're just going to leave it like that. So back inside the bounty board, we go into our bounty board and our inner objects, and I have a document, and this is the document that gets displayed. I think I've made some other videos of how to make documents, so I'm not going to run through all the details here, but essentially this is what the document looks like. It's a pretty generic piece of paper that's supposed to kind of be a bounty board in general, as a scary, spoopy picture. Says the following beasts need to be dealt with, kind of describes what's going on, and then says basically peruse through the pages to find a bounty to take. So as you're perusing through, the first quest is the rotten one, which is the quest we made in the last video. Has some objectives and some wards, and you can right click to accept. I'm sorry, just click to accept in general. So we're going to go ahead and click this and see what happens. Nothing as of right now. Oh, that's right, because okay, so sorry, I'm getting way ahead of myself. So this document now, when you open it, it has a workflow, and when you close it, it has a workflow. Let's go into the workflows. So the closing workflow is very simple. It just plays the sound of a document closing. Furthermore, there's a back document, which essentially will close the document. Oops. You can see here that I have a back, and if you click this option, it'll basically close the document for you instead of having to click the X. I have a quest workflow, which is actually linked to the accept button inside the document. So when you click on this button right here, it'll actually link to this workflow down here, which effectively reveals the quest called the Rotten One and starts that quest. And then the most confusing one is called Open. And we'll get to this in just a second. So let me open up my campaign. All right, we've completed this guy. And let's start this quest. Whoops, clicked it twice. All right, excellent. So that's all working and in tip-top shape. The one thing we haven't gone over, though, is how did I play that sound when I opened the document the first time of the quest completion, and then how did those two objectives get completed? And if you notice, the second time I opened the document, that sound didn't play, nor did the objectives get completed again, even though I hadn't started the next quest. If I lost you guys, I'll explain it here in just a second. So, when the document is opened, essentially it runs a condition. This condition is basically seeing if the first hint from our quest, the bounty board, has been completed or not. So if it's set equal to false, that means it's checking if it hasn't been completed. If it hasn't been completed, then it runs through this workflow. This workflow plays the quest completed noise and completes the two objectives, delays for 2 seconds, and then starts the rotten one. Changes the quest step to the final quest step of the bounty board, effectively completing it. So I'll run through that one more time. Basically checks if you have completed the first quest, essentially, because you'll see here that it's checking if the first hint has been completed. After this workflow runs, the first quest objective is completed. So basically this is a one-time running workflow, essentially, that once you run this, this option will constantly be false from here on out. Completes the two objectives when it does run, and then it changes the quest step to the final quest step of the bounty board, effectively completing the quest. Therefore, after we run this workflow once, if we open the document again, this part won't run. It'll just display the document. Alright, so let's see this in action one more time, and I'll explain everything as we go through. So, we start the quest, shows the quest reveal, auto-revealed, campaign workflow, shows us a little sign, and then we get our first quest objective up here from the quest step. We walk in here, we get our second quest objective. Each of these is not completed at this point. It's telling you to interact with this object. We come over here and interact with it. It will play the quest completion noise, as well as finish our objectives, and it will display the document. Well, let's just say I accidentally, I don't know, exit out of this or close it. Well, shoot, I don't want those noises to play again, right? So if I interact with this object again, it shouldn't. And that's because we've completed the bounty board and we've completed those 2 objectives, and therefore that condition was equated to false and didn't progress through that workflow. Now we can go ahead and accept our quest for the rotten one. You'll see here that I added a sound as well as the first hint of the objective for going to the Tranquil Cemetery. Let's go ahead and walk over and see what happens. Using the event links, I actually was able to do the zone change so that when we get to Tranquil Garden Cemetery, it completes that objective and tells us to go inside the church to find the rotten one, giving the player more information of where to go. Now, as we're moving along, something scary might happen along the way, and I encourage you guys to listen in to see what happens. The maddened ravings of the rotten one begin to grow louder. Alright, so what happened there was effectively that I tied a event link to our first quest step that's a zone change that will display or run a hint 3 display. So let's go ahead and run through what this thing is. So first, it completes the hint number 1 for our quest, delays for 4 seconds, and then reveals our quest objective, hint number 3. And hint number 3 is go to the church to find the rotten one, essentially. After that, it plays a sound, which was that noise right there. It delays for 20 seconds and then plays this awful ghoul noise, as well as the text that we saw saying the maddened ravings of the rotten one to begin to grow louder. So you can imagine that that's pretty terrifying to have that happen. 20 seconds, when everything's quiet, you're in the surrounding cemetery with all these ghouls, can really make the overall quest feel more immersive if your players are RP walking and doing this in an effective manner. The other thing I wanted to show you, however, if you might have seen the event link called TRP3 signal that's linked to a workflow called test. If you see under here, workflow test, it basically just displays text 1, 2, 3 and plays the same noise. Let me quickly see if I have this item in my inventory right now. I do not. Let me go ahead and add this item. This item is called DM Ghoul Noise. Now mind you, this should be inside the campaign, but for today's tutorial I didn't, just for the sake of time, because I forgot. Alright, so effectively, one second, I target my character and right click this. It displays the 1, 2, 3 and plays that awful noise. So, what this item does is essentially, it sounds like it just triggers a sound and displays a text. But what it actually does is this item commits an action called TRP3 send signal. So if we go to this item, under workflow, under use, effect send signal, and it has the signal ID, test, and the signal value event 1. And I'll go over what these mean in just a second. This is the signal identifier, and this is the value that it carries with it. So essentially, inside of our campaign, under the rotten one, in the first quest step, which is what we're currently on, under event links, I have an event link called TRP3 signal. So essentially, whenever a TRP3 signal is sent to a player or a target, it'll run this test workflow. What this test workflow does is it checks whether or not the string value, the identity of the send signal is equal to test, which was the name that we gave the signal in the first place. If that's true, it'll display text 1, 2, 3 and play sound 407. So this doesn't sound too amazing, right? I'm just a player that I could have just made this item display that from the get-go. I didn't have to send a signal and then have the signal be detected and then also linked to a workflow. Well, if you think about it, this item doesn't have to be used on just me. Let's say I'm in a party and I'm the dungeon master. And let's say one of the players is walking further ahead. I could click on that target as the dungeon master, and right click this object, and the sound and the display text would only be sent to that player. This gives the Dungeon Master a whole new array of tools at their dispense during an RP event with their players and with their guildmates. And I encourage you guys to check this out a little bit more. The rest of this quest is pretty much the same standard thing. We go inside, we quickly kill this guy, we interact with him per usual, loot him. So you see there I did two things. Number one, I had it complete the two objectives from before, as well as play a sound for their completion, and then also had it display talk with the bounty board NPC associated with a sound. So let's talk about what we learned today. For starters, we learned about the interact tool, which basically makes the world more interactable for the TRP3 player, and it's dependent upon conditioned workflows that track the player's location or who they're targeting to run the appropriate workflows. In today's scenario, we use the location condition to make this old Heroes Call board an interactable bounty board in Darkshire. This idea also has further opportunities and advancements. So if I made another tool called Inspect, let's say, it could be like a magnifying glass in your inventory, I could go around the world and I could set this fountain as a location. And if I wanted to inspect this fountain, I could right click it, and depending upon how close my character is to this location of the fountain, it would display the description of this fountain. Or I could also have it display the description of this torch. For a more campaign-oriented approach as well, you could be DMing, let's say, a caravan run for a party, and you're running down this road, and suddenly you stop because of either, let's say, you find a fallen over wagon or a abandoned caravan. And basically your players have to find clues as to what happened. And they could go out into the world with pre-recorded spots. Let's say one spot's right here, another spot's over here. And when players interact with those areas, it triggers a clue that gets presented to that player, which then allows them to RP and find out the cause of why the caravan is abandoned, etc., etc. Alternatively, you could set up a murder mystery, let's say inside the Raven Tavern over here, where there's been a murder and everyone in the tavern is on lockdown, maybe because guards are blocking the entrance and they're trying to make sure everyone that is present stays inside the tavern. After that, players will have to interact with certain parts of the inn to find the clues leading to the killer, who may or may not still be inside the tavern. This option provides a whole bunch of opportunities for dungeon masters as well as just for normal players to make their world more interactable and more engaging. Secondly, we learned the power of the send signal option in campaigns, which allows your dungeon master or just a regular player to send a signal to another player inside your party. This basically allows you to coordinate campaigns with each other. So let's say on our ghoul quest, instead of every player being able to loot the ghoul finger, only one player gets to. So when one player interacts with the ghoul finger, would send a signal to everyone in the party, let's say, that would prevent them from interacting and looting the body. So only one player would get the 5 gold, and then would have to disperse that gold amongst their party members evenly, or maybe not, after the campaign finishes. I highly encourage you guys to join the Discord for TRP3 Extended. They have a wonderful community that is very, very engaging and also very helpful, and has assisted me a lot for this video, as well as in my journey in developing and creating new items in TRP3 Extended. Today we saw the creation of the bounty board, as well as some further advancements in our quest, the Rotten One. And today's video is a little bit different, as I'd already created the quest and ran through my creation on it with you guys. I know this might have not been as in depth, and there might be some gaps in how I did everything, so I will promise you that the next 2 quests that we have, which are for the bounty board Neuroxus and for the Forgotten Soldier, that I will be doing a full recording of each of these quests so that you guys get the benefit of seeing everything done as it's being created. I'm considering if I want to stream this or just do a live recording on YouTube. Either way, it'll be a little bit longer, and I hope you guys like that style. Anyways, please feel free to drop a like and a comment below. Definitely leave me a comment if you guys want to see something in particular, or if something was more confusing. I would be happy to answer and respond to your comments. Finally, I will be submitting these items to wygo.com, which is essentially just a TRP3 extended database, that allows players to download previously generated items from other creators and allows you to see how they were created and also use them yourself. Anyways, that's it for today, guys. Thank you so much, and I'll see you guys next time for the next movie.